Hey guys, I'm going to justify both financially and environmentally why you should start making your own coffee. Hey guys, welcome back to Saving Green. My name is Josh. Thank you so much because we just hit 100 subscribers, so that's a cool thing. Really appreciate all your support. And today we're talking coffee. So coffee for me is an absolute necessity. I drink a few cups of coffee every day, about 12 to 16 ounces, and I can't live without this stuff. Even as a surgeon, when I'm operating, I cut back a little bit, but it's a daily habit for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of you out there. And if you're thinking, is it worth the time? Is it worth the expense? Is it worth the environmental footprint of making and brewing your own coffee? I'm going to justify for you today why I think that it is. So as Graham Stephan talks about in his video, millennials have a real habit in drinking expensive coffees. At about $2 to $3 a pop, if you do that every day, it really adds up. About $1,000 a year spent at Starbucks on those fancy frappuccinos. But what if you scaled back and made your own coffee every day? Is it worth it? So I ran some numbers on some common retail coffee varietals of homegrown ground coffee beans, and here is the breakdown. So if we assume about 10 grams of ground coffee for every 6-ounce cup of liquid coffee, that breaks down to about 13 to 20 cents per average per 6-ounce cup, give or take 8 cents, depending on the brand. If you're particularly frugal and you go with a grocery store brand like Folgers, you're looking at only 8 cents per cup. If you go to Costco and buy their name brand Kirkland coffee in a large 40-ounce bag, you're also looking about 8 cents per cup. If you go to Dunkin' or Starbucks and bring that home as ground coffee, then you're looking at about 30 to 35 cents per cup, so certainly a premium on those name brand coffees. Now obviously, the larger the bag, the lower the per ounce cost of the ground beans, so often it makes sense to buy the largest bag that you can. Now I've populated this handy chart with a whole range of different coffee sizes in terms of how many ounces per bag you can purchase and how that would translate to your daily coffee allotment. So as you can see here, if you plug in 10 grams of ground coffee for every 6 ounces, about 1.5 tablespoons, you can see that the average price here is about 20 cents. Now for us, we brew just over 25 ounces of liquid coffee every day, and we actually only use about 30 grams of ground coffee in our percolator. So that breaks down to just about 7 or about 1 tablespoon per 6-ounce cup. Now, if we look at the Dunkin' Donuts variety, that comes out to about 10 cents per 6-ounce cup. And that's from buying a large 45-ounce bin from Costco. So if we take an average of 12 ounces, let's say 2 standard cups of coffee per day, at 1.5 tablespoons per cup, that would be 10 grams, that would be 40 cents per person per day of your coffee habit. If we scale that over a full year, it's about $150 a year. Now if we compare that to the retail price of coffee, let's say $1.50 per cup, you're saving over $400 a year just by making your own coffee every day. Now, if you're making coffee and sacrificing those fancy lattes at $3.50 a cup, then you're saving well over $1,000 a year. So yeah, it definitely makes financial sense to make your own coffee. Now, what about if we factor in the electricity use of running your coffee maker, or in our case, our percolator, which we prefer for its palatability, ease of use, and rich flavor. In a previous video, I measured the wattage of our percolator, and at 1,000 watts for 6 minutes of runtime, plus the hour or so of warming, that amounts to a whopping 47 cents per month of electricity use to make our coffee. Scaled out over a year, give or take $5 added to your sum cost, so not all that much. Also, if we consider the cost of the percolator itself, at $70, you're going to be paying this self off compared to retail coffee in about 2 or 3 months. Now, coffee itself actually carries the lion's share of the environmental footprint. In fact, ground Arabica coffee beans are about equivalent to their mass in dairy, or about 15 grams of CO2 per gram of coffee beans. Now, basically, because some weight is lost after roasting, when you add your 10 grams of coffee, you're actually really adding about 18 grams worth of green or unroasted coffee beans. So this also means that if you can purchase coffee that has been roasted in its home country before transport, then as shipping weights decrease, you can save a significant amount of the carbon footprint. Also, other sustainable practices like organic fertilizers or appropriate water usage and things like that can actually cut the overall environmental footprint of the coffee beans itself to about an 80% savings on the environmental footprint. Certainly not insignificant. So where you buy your coffee from actually matters quite a bit. That would mean that your average cup of coffee has about a 280 gram CO2 equivalent carbon footprint, or about the equivalent of a 30 mile per gallon car traveling about a mile. So not a whole lot, but these figures can double when you consider dairy for lattes and things like that factored in as well. So in addition to coffee, we want to look at the containers, and there are a few different beverage options available. So if we take a typical cardboard cup like this one from Dunkin' Donuts, yes, it has a plastic lid and the straw. Obviously there are certain environmental impacts to consider here, and that's what we're going to break down right now. Now, one life cycle analysis sponsored by VTT, which is a cup manufacturing company, rates the carbon equivalent footprint of 8.1 grams of CO2 per average cardboard cup. Now, if we recycle those cups, that drops to 3.8, and if we use a plant-based polyethylene, that actually drops to 2.8. Now, keep in mind that polyethylene is that sealant, that wax kind of lining that keeps it insulated, and unfortunately makes these not recyclable most of the time. So, something else to consider. Now, if we reference the 2007 study from Air and Water Quality Survey, that actually looks at the paper industry in general, of which cardboard cups are a product, and they actually rate the overall footprint of about 69 grams per kilogram of paper or paperboard, which is actually only 7% of the mass equivalent in terms of carbon output, so much, much less. That would rate this 25-gram cup at just about 2 grams of carbon output, as opposed to the 8 cited in that article. Now, Winnipeg has their own environmental commission, and they have a nice little handy list of the carbon impact per mass, and they put paper at about 2.2 times mass, which would put this 25-gram cup at about 50 grams of CO2 equivalents. So certainly the numbers vary quite a bit by region. So let's say we wanted to estimate the carbon footprint of this cup purchased every day. Well, at just over 8 grams per cup times 365, you're looking at about 2.9 kilograms of CO2 per year, which is about the equivalent of a third of a gallon of gas. Now, of course, we want to consider other types of pollution as well. Per Wikipedia, on average, paper manufacturing in general can account to up to 5% of water and air pollutants and 1% of greenhouse gases worldwide. In fact, in the US in 2015, about 313 tons of toxic air pollutants, including particulates, sulfates, nitrogen oxides, cadmium, lead, mercury, etc., were the product of paper manufacturing alone. And in Canada, 5% of all the industrial waste was due to paper and cardboard manufacturing. Now, of course, a very small fraction of that is due to cardboard cups, but every little bit counts and every little bit adds up. So, what about reusable containers like ceramic or stainless steel mugs like my beloved Contigo? Well, if we consider that the same LCA analysis looked at ceramic mugs and their environmental impact from dishwashing, things like that, they said you'll break even at about 350 uses of that ceramic mug. That seems a little extreme, but nonetheless, in a year, you're going to break even. Now, what about stainless steel? Well, a few studies cite that the overall carbon impact and footprint of stainless steel per gram is about 3.3 times mass. And that breaks down to a little over half, 58% from raw materials, about 90% from electricity, and about 50% from steelmaking itself. Now, if we consider this particular mug and just the metal component, which is double-walled and stainless, keeping my beverages insulated for up to 8 hours at a time, we see that this 231-gram stainless steel container at about 3.3 times mass would make a carbon footprint of just about 760 grams of CO2 per mug. Now, let's add a little fudge factor of maybe 30% due to the fabrication of this particular mug, not just the raw materials of stainless, and we'll call it a cool kilogram of CO2 equivalents every time I buy this mug. Now, if we add in the 92 grams worth of plastic on this lid, again, at anywhere between 1.2 and 5.4 times mass of CO2 equivalents for hard plastics like this, as a mean, let's say about 3 times per mass, that would add another 300 or so grams to this total, bringing this up to 1,300 grams of CO2 equivalents. Now, other studies, like again, Winnipeg, rates stainless steel at almost double at 6.15 grams of CO2 per gram of stainless steel, so that would double these figures to just over 2 kilograms of CO2 per container. Now, if we factor in, again as a comparison to a reusable cardboard cup, at 8 grams, this stainless steel mug would completely pay for itself from a carbon standpoint in 6 to 12 months, depending on the manufacturing methods of stainless steel. Now, of course, there's more to consider than just carbon. We also want to think about other toxic pollutants and air quality and water waste as well. And while the plastic and metal industries do certainly impact pollution significantly, breaking them down, the contributions from the cups and containers was a little beyond the scope of this video, but I will link down to some other resources if you want more information about those respective impacts. Now, what about K-cups? Well, unfortunately, according to my analysis here, K-cups are on average about 75% more expensive per gram of ground coffee than their bagged equivalents, which an average K-cup averages between 8 and 11 grams per cup. And since no matter the size, from 6 to 12 ounces of coffee, you're only going to be using 1 cup, I kept these values normalized so you can see as a direct comparison that yes, the K-cups are just simply more expensive. Now furthermore, this empty K-cup weighs about 4 grams, and it includes plastic and HDPE5 type plastic, which unfortunately is not recyclable in most areas. Now in 2021, Keurig is supposedly transferring to only recyclable plastic, so that is somewhat of a benefit. But this is composed of a filter, the plastic, and the aluminum cap. So breaking that down, washing it off, and then recycling the individual components, I think isn't worth the effort and kind of counteracts any apparent convenience afforded by the K-cup to begin with. So from both a cost and environmental standpoint, I think K-cups are ill-advised. So where does that leave us? So overall, the carbon footprint of a yearly habit of coffee breaks down to about 20 gallons of gasoline equivalents. Now, if you factor in a 2-mile commute to and from Dunkin' or Starbucks every day, that means that at 30 miles per gallon, you'll be offsetting your carbon footprint in about 6 months. Now, when you factor in the cost of the containers, then the numbers get a little interesting. And it basically boils down to the longevity of each container. Now, since stainless steel on average as consumer goods can last up to 15 years, I ran the numbers with 1, 2, and 5 years, assuming, like me, you don't lose this after a couple years. Now, the longer you keep your container, the better the environmental payback. For example, if you kept this same stainless steel bottle for 5 years, you'd be cutting over 91% of your carbon footprint as opposed to purchasing a cardboard cup every day. Now, if I spent $16 on this mug, if I only kept it for 1 year, I'd be adding 4 cents a day to the cost of my daily coffee. So if we add all that in, we're still looking at about 20 cents a day, give or take, per cup of coffee, even after the purchase of a mug. So there you have it. The numbers speak for themselves. The best way to enjoy coffee every day is to make it yourself. Don't use K-cups or filters. Use a reusable container and make it to your own specifications. So hit that like button if you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks again.